Hello and welcome back to the first late night rant with me. My name is Dimitri. I'm a last year medical student, and I will be talking about the 5 things I learned into medical school. Now, they might not necessarily be connected to studying, they're just general lessons I've learned, and I think they're going to be useful for you. Now, the first thing that I learned is that intelligence won't really save you. When you're in high school, studying is a lot easier, and you can pull a one-nighter and you're just done. Maybe you can just study for 2 or 3 days and you can be done and pass the exam, which is perfectly fine. In med school, things are actually a little bit more difficult. You could sometimes save yourself with an all-nighter, which I haven't done, but on the long term, they're not really nice. Now, there are actually two main points here. The first one is that you have to understand that discipline is the thing that you need. And second of all, the things that you're learning aren't actually always important, but you're going to need them for later. The reason why I say discipline is not in this sense. And I don't mean discipline in the classical sense. For an example, I couldn't, for the life of me, make myself study at home, which was one of the most difficult things, to just sit at the table and just open up a book and study. That was for me really, really difficult. I would have procrastinated, finding something else and so on. And if you have been following some of the more influential sort of neuropsychologists or scientists on the internet, there was some study and some points which were being made that boys are doing worse in school. Now, why is this important? Because I've also noticed that my friends who were girls were incredible at just studying at home. And I would ask them, hey, do you study at the library? Because I'm there really often. Maybe we can study together. And they were almost never in the library. Now, that doesn't mean gradually, but for me, and I think just for some people, or especially maybe guys, it's really difficult to just make yourself sit down. So the most important thing for me was just making an environment where I could study. And if you have also people who are willing to come with you to the library, or just maybe make a study group where you ask each other questions and where you give each other tips, is a lot more beneficial than you think. The second part is, even though you pulled an all-nighter, you're going to need those information at one point. In medical school, you really get retested a couple of times. So for an example, if you studied in the first or second semester, you're probably going to need it for the USMLE. That doesn't mean it's useful information. The only thing that says is that you're going to be tested on it again. I couldn't care less what sort of receptor was responsible for, I don't know, what pathway. And you've probably done the Krebs cycle about 50 times and you still don't know half of it. Maybe not even a third. And neither do I. And the second part is that nobody really cares how hard you work. And I think people understand that medical students study a lot, but at the end of the day, the only thing that really counts is the outcome. There were people, and some of those people was I, especially at the beginning, who was studying a lot and needing to put extra effort. If you're an international student studying in a completely different language, then this was probably you, because you needed to put extra effort and extra hours just to understand the topic and save it in a different way in your brain. In medical school, I had the feeling the effort is rarely really rewarded. But here's the truth, nobody really cares. At the end of the day, it's result. Most of your colleagues don't really care that much because they have to think of their own. And the system and university really don't care if you put that much effort. That's the feeling I got. It's just, you either pass the exam and do it, or you just don't. That's also good and bad, because you have to be mature now, you have to do your own thing. But the effort on itself doesn't really count. And I think you see it also in the profession, that most of the times the thing that really counts is just the outcome, and the effort is really overseen. This is not the extreme, this is not always the case, but it can sometimes be the case. Third thought, you've probably had this, we've all read it. I think there's a thing that we all had, and that's the imposter syndrome. And that thing never goes away. I thought that at one point in med school, I'm going to feel like I belong, and you're going to have this sort of feeling of belonging, but it actually never really happened. The only time where I really felt like I'm belonging was at the end of med school, well, when I already knew something, where I was already competent to do things on my own, and the other physicians actually trusted me and sent me to do things, and that was pretty cool. But I think now, when I'm going to start with the residency, I'm also in a new hierarchical position, and that's how imposter syndrome happens, is when you start in a new hierarchical position, you still haven't really gotten comfortable with it. You need time. And that's what's happening throughout med school. You're just like getting higher and higher until you're a doctor, and you said, okay, I actually did something the past 6 or 7 years. Now I can do something with it. And I think all students, all residents, even a boss, they already had it all. But I think the difference is that the good ones actually learn how to trust themselves while they're doing it. And even if they're in difficult situations, they already trust themselves and they already have the competence enough to try to do it. And the second part is that you can't save everyone. I think in med school, we have seen probably a lot of things, especially towards the ending of it. And you actually learn that you can't save everyone, no matter how much effort you put. And also you learn that not everybody wants saving, which is a really difficult thing to understand. And what I think is that throughout the way, you actually have to find your own mechanisms and your own philosophy about how to cope with this, because it's going to happen. You're going to have mistakes and you're going to have everything. And the problem is that sometimes you can do everything right and it still won't be enough. Especially, there were some cases which I had when I was doing especially the psychiatry rotation, where they were telling us about how they actually had agreements with people that they wouldn't hurt themselves or do anything worse. And the end of the day, that didn't really work. And even if you've been doing a CPR, the whole team does everything. There are 15 people at least in the room. Everybody's doing something. And sometimes it's not enough and it's beyond your control. And I think it's also a thing which I was trying to define, is that you have to separate your self-worth, the effort that you've also put, from the outcome on itself, because sometimes you can do only as little to influence the outcome. And I think if you don't really learn how to do this, I think at one point the job will break you. But I still have to see that. And the fifth part is that medicine is not your identity. I think that's a really interesting topic, because some people identify themselves so much with the topic and so much with medicine that that's only their personality, and that's it. It's like there's nothing more. And for some, being a doctor can be your whole purpose, which is really amazing, because some of them really do amazing work. And probably one of the very, very best that I know were some part of this. But also the coolest one, and the ones which have taught me the most, and which I felt they were sort of a mentor figure, were the ones who were actually cool and had something on the side, and they were actually easygoing. And I think medicine is part of your life, a huge part of your life, but it shouldn't be your whole life. I think that's my opinion. That's what I was trying to do, at least now. And these are tips for med school, not for them. And especially in university, I think you should be trying and experimenting so much with things that you find new or interesting, or even you might have hated it, because I never thought I would have been doing this, especially not at the beginning of med school. And I probably wouldn't have done half of the things I've done. And I think those things have influenced me a lot more than I think. So going outside of medicine and trying new things, especially when you're med school, because you have the ability to fail. It's fine. You're a student. Nobody's really going to judge you for it. So if you do it while you're in med school, you're going to be fine. A really crucial part for me was actually learning how to think, not just think, not just say something, but actually learn how to think, how to acknowledge biases and so on, and just getting new hobbies. You're not going to have that much time later, and you can already feel it with your friends who are already starting with a residency. I think everybody knows this. So this is another reminder for you to try as much as possible throughout med school, meet new people, and don't forget to have fun. All right, some closing thoughts. Med school is going to teach you a lot about being a doctor, but it also teaches you a lot about yourself, how you deal with stress, how you deal under pressure, how you get things done. Some of the things which you learn are good, some of them not that much. Some of them are also really ugly. But the biggest lesson is that you're bigger than this. And the second you forget that, that most things shouldn't really define you, is the second you're going to realize you're going to be free. And that's what I'm trying to say to myself basically throughout this video, that I should not forget this when I'm done with med school. Those are the 5 things which I've learned throughout med school. Some of them might help you, some of them maybe not. But at the end of the day, the only thing they should also do is make you think.